What's going on, everyone? Taylor Kyles here from CLNS Media, joined by my CLNS Media family member, Mike Kadlick, to discuss Jerod Mayo's first appearance on the Greg Hill Show. Now, obviously, it was a very different vibe compared to what we usually get with Bill Belichick. You had Jerod Mayo cracking jokes, making fun, poking fun at people. It was very, very different. It was very entertaining. Don't want to poo-poo how Bill was on these shows, but, it was pretty easy to kind of get lulled to sleep when he's just kind of, just going to do what's best for the team. That gets a little old. But what were your general thoughts? First of all, how are you? I'm just so excited to talk about some Jerod Mayo. How are you? And then, how did you feel about Jerod's first appearance on the
show? I want to make sure that I am connected okay, and you can see me and hear me because I'm a little shaky. I'm good. Perfect. Okay, because I can barely see you. That's fine. We'll monitor the chat. But now that you can hear me, thank you for having me on, especially because Jerod was on our airwaves this morning over at WEEI. So works out great this down. I loved it. I thought he was incredibly, candid. And like you said, it wasn't Belichickian. It was definitely, he really, whether he's actually telling the truth or not, he at least, gives, I guess, more like thoughtful answers and, is thorough and doesn't just kind of, shoot people off. So that was good to see. He had plenty of interesting answers, which I'm sure we'll get to, about leadership and Mac Jones and, their thoughts on free agency and that they're going to spend, and talking about the number 3 overall pick. Like, if this was Bill Belichick's introductory interview on the Greg Hill Show, and they asked him what they were going to do with the number 3 pick, he would have scoffed in their face, where, Mayo actually gave a decent answer. So, good stuff. I'm excited for that to continue. Mayo Mondays and starting in August. So we'll see where that goes. But good stuff from Mayo this morning.
We're going to dive into those comments. So the first one, he was asked about whether or not he actually is the person who's going to be running the hiring process. Obviously, a lot of holes to fill on the staff, and probably could be more holes once Bill Belichick actually figures out where he's going to land. Seems like it's going to be with the Falcons, but we don't know yet. So when asked that question, he said, yeah, it's all me. But he also mentioned that Matt Groh, Director of Player Personnel, and Director of Scouting Elliot Wolf are also involved in that process. Now, I know that people have been very skeptical about Groh and Wolf based on, the Patriots' previous draft history. The reality is that we don't know how much involvement they actually had when it came to the picks. We don't really know anything about their jobs or what they've been doing. Like, we know what their descriptions are. We know what those roles entail. But in terms of how much was Bill and how much was them, we have no idea. Now, in fairness, Matt Groh is kind of a complete mystery to us. But Elliot Wolf, I think it's fair to point out, he came up in the Green Bay front office. Now, the Packers are very unlike other teams in the sense that they rarely spend in free agency. Their philosophy for years, going back to Elliot Wolf's dad, Ron Wolf, when he was the general manager for the Packers, he put a huge emphasis on building through the draft. So that means you put a lot of resources into it. You make sure that, your staff is on board and there's a lot of cooperation in terms of how exactly that gets done. And the Packers have more success on a consistent basis when it comes to building through the draft than anybody. It helps when you go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. That obviously is a pretty big boost. But no one's looking at the Packers being like, oh, it's all the quarterbacks. They're usually talented teams, even if they do have their deficiencies. So what do you think about them being involved in the process and the collaborative effort that we've been hearing about?
Yeah, it was kind of funny when they asked him about, do you have autonomy and full control over this coaching search? He goes, oh yeah, it's all me. It's all me. And Matt and Elliot are helping out too. I thought that was kind of funny, but I mean, it shouldn't be all him, right? I mean, he's never built a coaching staff before. He should be, leaning on these guys.
And he's acknowledged that too. He wants to lean on the experts.
100%. Yeah, he says it himself. He wants his team, whatever. He said the other day something about being strong in the weight room. He's like, I don't know how to teach squats, so I'm going to rely on somebody else to do that. And so I think that's good. He knows he doesn't know what he doesn't know. So I guess that's a positive from this whole thing. And I think it's important for him to lean on these resources. It also tells me that, whether they ultimately do hire a general manager or not, after the draft, which was sort of a rumor report type thing that's kind of come out here along the way. Groh and Wolf, it seems like they're here to stay in some capacity. Groh is obviously, I mean, both these guys are sons of, Al Groh is a football guy, and same with Ron. And so, they've been around the league. I don't want to call it nepotism, but they're sons of guys just like the Belichicks were. And so
you call a spade. They can be good at their jobs and still be nepo babies.
Of course, yeah. And so that's kind of where this fits. But it's good that they're involved in the search. I think it's important. And you're right about Elliott Wolf too. Like, not only was he in Green Bay, he's learned under John Dorsey as well. He worked in Cleveland for a little while there with him. When they built an okay team, and then it kind of fell off. Like when they drafted like guys like Baker Mayfield and things like that. I remember the reason I know the name Elliott Wolf is because of the Baker Mayfield pick in Cleveland. And as much as it didn't work out in Cleveland, I know that Wolf was involved in that because I've heard Baker talk about him before. And Baker Mayfield just played his ass off last night, and was almost on the cusp of playing for a Super Bowl. So the guy knows how to evaluate talent, and I think it's important to note that he's, I guess, in the coaching search as well, because they need good coaching here. And so I'm sure that if he can evaluate good talent, maybe he can evaluate coaching as well.
I think we can all agree that at the very least, it's going to be interesting. We talked about this. It's going to be interesting to see how this process plays out, because we don't know how much of the involvement was Bill. So now we'll get to see what these guys' perspectives are. We're going to find out quickly in free agency. That's just like about a month away, 2 months away, or something like that.
Yeah.
So we're going to get an idea of how Matt Gross sees team building, whether he's going to, go all out to try to get a big name receiver. We're going to talk about free agency a little bit later. And then Elliott Wolf, where he prioritizes these draft picks and how he sees the roster. But it does sound like it's going to be Mayo's vision, and then they all work together to figure out how to best suit that. Going on to more coaching staff or more staff news, we found out, or really had it just confirmed, that Steve and Brian Belichick were offered to return to the team. And I think Greg Hill put it pretty well, where he's like, I think it was Greg or somebody else on the show mentioned that, the defense, you guys proved yourselves. Like, we want to make sure that there's continuity on that side of the ball. We've kind of discussed this, but just to kind of reiterate, now that we do have the confirmation, and Mayo himself, we've heard the reports that he and Steve are very close. We hadn't really heard about him and Brian before, so it was nice to hear you saying, like, obviously we know they're great coaches, but that they have a relationship. So what did you think about that? Because I feel like for Steve, I don't really know why you'd want to, unless he has head coaching aspirations in the very near future.
Right.
I don't know why you'd want to follow your dad, especially because Mike Reese didn't really report, but he kind of speculated that if Steve were to stay, he would probably be elevated to something like assistant head coach, where like he and DeMarcus Covington, these guys who have really just been more not really coordinators in title, but Steve has kind of been a co-defensive coordinator, but really a position coach.
Right.
You see a guy like him and DeMarcus Covington to get them to stay, give them a boosted title, and maybe help them long term.
Yeah, I guess that is sort of how Reese does his reporting. He's kind of soft with it, not in a bad way, but he'll slide something in, and it's like, oh yeah, no, that is true. He doesn't make a big deal out of it, which is like, when Reese says something, you listen. So if Steve does come back, it sounds like it would be, like you said, either an assistant head coach, senior advisor type to the head coach. And that makes sense. Like you said, Mayo has said in the past that they're close, and that's been, confirmed. I think it's, again, going back to the difference between Mayo versus Bill on these shows. It's like every time they bring up a report from the outside, he was just like, yes, confirmed. That is correct. And it's like, you never, Bill Belichick would never confirm a report. All he would say was, yeah, that's you guys talking. You don't know what's going on in these walls type stuff. And so, again, fascinating stuff. But yeah, so it sounds like, Steve and Brian do, in fact, have the opportunity to come back. And Mayo really made it sound like, and not that it would be anything other than this, but he did make it sound like it's either here or with Bill wherever he goes. Yeah. So because he said, they have the opportunity. They'll either stay here or follow their father is basically what he said. And I found it interesting, too, that Reese pointed out that Brian Belichick was still in the Patriots building working late last week. So you wonder where they end up. I'm with you. I think that if Steve had, like, sort of like what Kyle Shanahan did, he finally moved on under his dad in Washington. Yep. And he built his own thing in Cleveland, then he built his own thing in Atlanta, and he ultimately became a head coach. Like, if Steve does have those, aspirations to, build himself into his own thing here, he should work under Mayo. He should, take a step up. And would he end up the defensive coordinator under Belichick and call it Atlanta? Yeah, probably. But at some point you kind of got to step away and, start to build on your own. Obviously it helped Kyle Shanahan. I'm sure that would help Steve Belichick here. Basically
it's Jerod Belichick
because they're like this. Yeah, exactly. Right. And so again, it's still the Patriots tree here. So is he really going off on his own if he's here? Not really, but it's still different than not coaching for your dad. So We'll see what happens, but it'll be certainly be interesting. And again, you use the word interesting. I use the word interesting all the time, so forgive me, but it really is like these aren't like massive stories, but they all turn into a massive story because of all the change over here. And so it's interesting to point out, all the intricacies that are going into Mayo, building out this coaching staff.
And then when you going back to what you said about Mayo, like the confirmed, not confirmed. It's funny because Belichick came up in like the media school under Bill Parcells, where it's like,
right.
You have a respect for the media, but you also understand, like you understand it's a tool where you can use them if you want, but also like you don't want to give them too much. Whereas Mayo has worked in media, he knows people in media, he has a different type of respect for them. So there's a little less, and also just his personality. There's not as much rigidity. Now, maybe, as he goes on, he learns that some stuff you just don't want to say because then you're going to get asked about it nonstop. Like the comment about
I think he might already understand that that's going to become a thing, and that's going to start to happen really quickly because he really has been an open book in the last few times, and some of the things may turn and bite him in the ass. So we'll see what happens. But I'm with you. I think there's going to come a time where he not shuts up a little bit, but just is more, I guess, careful in what he says and how. And what he says, understanding how it can be interpreted. So
it's just more you don't know what you don't know. Like it's going to take until he has that one comment that he thinks is just totally nonchalant. Again, he already had it. We're going to talk about it more later, but it's interesting having somebody who has a very different dynamic with the media.
Right.
We're going to get more into Mayo's comments, but first, quick. I'm just going to throw it to FanDuel. We love him. Got to pay the bills. We'll be back. What happened?
Let them talk about it.
NFL season is wrapping up, and there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. Now, the app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, find bets in the new Explore tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
All right, so we also got confirmation from Jerod today that they are, in fact, interviewing Nick Caley, the Rams tight ends coach, formerly the Patriots tight ends and at some points fullbacks coach, who after the 2022 season, when he was passed over for the offensive coordinator job in favor of Matt Patricia, still insane, he, the next season, went on and joined the Rams, made a lateral move, where I know it's confusing because he still stayed, even though Patricia was a coordinator, and then there was another coordinator change and he left for the lateral move, but when someone takes the same job, it's basically them saying, I'm not happy where I am. But now Belichick is gone. 100%. Jerod Mayo's in charge. There's a different level of respect there. He wasn't asked about Zach Robinson, but it was reported that Zach will be interviewing tomorrow. And I do want to share some quick insights I got from Jordan Rodriguez, who covers the Rams for The Athletic, does a phenomenal job. I'm a huge fan of her work. I got some of her insights on Zach and Nick. So for Zach specifically, she said, Zach is basically in charge of this recent Rams QB renewal program, a la Baker and Carson Wentz. He is the one they most worked with. In terms of his calling experience, he did 2 preseason games this year. He was also in the mix for the Chargers offense coordinator job last year, and many in the Rams building thought he would get it, but then Kellen Moore became available. So it is important to note that Zach Robinson has not called plays before in a live game capacity outside of the preseason. But, they at least tried to get him integrated. He learned under Sean McVay. I'm sure some of that translates. But at the same time, with an offense that's going to be under what's probably going to be a huge rebuild, if not a total overhaul, that is something kind of want to watch out for. But he's highly respected in the league. I think we were both kind of on the same page that he was at the top, if not near the top of our list of coordinators. And then with Nick Caley, Nick is all energy all the time and a very good teacher. They have this 5th-round rookie tight end who looks like he could be a bona fide dude for them. That's a lot of Nick's work. I'm less certain about his calling experience, but he attacks everything with a ton of enthusiasm. And Mayo keeps saying, I want developers. He always, it's clear that he wants people who are teachers, who are really going to respect these players and see them more as, pupils than just as, pieces on a chessboard. So what were your thoughts on the news about Caley and Robinson? Because this is our first time really getting to talk about it. And would you be excited at the prospect of one or potentially both joining?
Yeah, I love both of it, I think, and I pointed this out, and I'll respond here. I wasn't going to get into it in the comments section of my article yesterday on WEEI, but I pointed out that I appreciated and liked that they're looking at coaches from the McVay tree. understanding that Zach Robinson is a McVay tree guy and Nick Caley was a Patriots head coach. I understand that. People are like, you don't know Nick Caley was here for that long. Like, I've been a fan of the team. I've covered the team for quite some time. I know who Nick Caley is, people. So I wasn't going to give into it there. I'm going to give into it here. So I hope you're watching this. Point being is Caley was a solid coach here at offensive coordinator candidate. He goes and he learns from McVay for a season. Now, is he going to be able to learn all the intricacies of that offense? No, of course not. But I want to point out too that and Devin McCourty said this about Caley last week. He was talking about him, and he went out to interview Matt Stafford for the Sunday Night Football game last weekend, and he said that he saw Nick Caley out there and was talking to him and saying that he's enjoyed being down there. Fundamentally, what McVay teaching is the same thing as New England. Tough football, smart players, all that stuff. It's just a different way of teaching it. So it's been awesome for me, it's been awesome for him to be in that now, is what McCourty said. So again, obviously he's not necessarily a McVay guy, but he, worked here and then went out and learned out there for a season and, potentially has the ability to come back. And so I like the idea of both guys. I think Robinson a little bit better just because he's worked there since 2019. He's been, entrenched in that system for some time. You worry about the play calling, but ultimately a new OC, a young and up and comer, anyone has to call plays for a first time. It's going to be trial by fire. And so if it's going to be one of them, I think Robinson is a slam dunk. Yeah. You mentioned it. He's, sort of a candidate high on a lot of people's boards. I think so too, but Caley has a little bit of, familiarity with the system too. And so Jerod Mayo was in last year's, interviews with all their candidates alongside Bill Belichick. So he was with Caley. So that's kind of why this seems to make sense. I think maybe he's calling him back. He liked what he heard. And I would watch out for a couple more from last year as well. Maybe a Keenan McCardle or someone like that, just because again, Mayo was there. So, watch out for those. There's going to be more than just these two. So, but I like the idea of it. I like the idea of a guy who's learned from McVay coming in to call this offense. So we'll see where it goes, but happy that this is their start because aim high. I think that's what you have to do here. Don't settle for anything. So I like it.
And also there's the potential that they get both because Zach Robinson is the pass game coordinator and quarterbacks coach. So the next step in his, career evolution is probably going to be offensive coordinator. But with Caley only having ever been a tight ends coach, he could maybe, the Patriots don't have a pass game coordinator right now, but that could certainly be a title they give him where, he takes a bigger step in that capacity. Maybe, if Zach Robinson does well because of how highly he's respected, if he has, at this point, you could have one good season as an offensive coordinator, especially in certain systems. Like if he turns the Patriots into like a top 12 offense, then he's probably going to end up getting a head coaching job, especially because he's from the McVay tree. That's just how these things work. We're already seeing it with Bobby Slowick. We're seeing it with Dave Canales. Like they've had one good season calling plays, and they're already being seriously considered for head coaching jobs. So you can project that if they do get both, Robinson leaves after a season or two, and then Nick Caley becomes your offensive coordinator, maybe sticks around for a while until, then you just kind of create a system where you have some backup plans, whereas once the Pats lost Josh McDaniels, they had no fallback. They technically had a fallback plan on the roster in Nick Caley, but they didn't want to give him the job for whatever reason. So I think that's a really interesting possibility.
I'm with you. And because, and my whole point in this, before they hired Mayo and when the idea, and I'm sure I've said it on this show, I've said it basically everywhere, but just to kind of connect it to this, where one of the reasons why I was a little bit against a defensive head coach is because, right now in the league, offense is, the more important side of the football. Let's just, call it what it is. And when you have an offensive head coach, your system stays in place essentially for the entirety of the head coach's career there, where if you have a defensive head coach, you're bringing an OC, and like you said, this thing happens where, say Robinson kicks ass for 2 seasons, he's going to get head coaching, offers and jobs, and he's going to leave, and then somebody else is going to have to come in. But if you do, again, mold these guys like Caley did under McDaniels, which, again, blows my mind that they didn't give it to it, but we're 2 years removed, and let's focus on this team. Having that pipeline is a positive, so that would be a huge plus to bring in both those guys and not just have it be one of them because, Caley, if he does get a bump up and, a title change, which Jerod Mayo has talked about, and I'm actually writing about that right now for tomorrow for WEEI.com, just how, where the coaching search is at and kind of getting into Mayo's comments on titles because last week he talked about titles are important, no shot to Bill Belichick, he said, but it tells you what people are and what they do and it helps them move forward. And so a change of title for Nick Caley to potentially move back to the East Coast could be something to watch. So, we'll see where that goes. But yeah, that makes sense.
I will slightly push back on one thing. on the offensive side of the ball being most important, because this weekend we saw Mike McDonald was like, nah,
no,
defense still matters, because he has found a way. I mean, having the Ravens defense absolutely helps. And obviously when he was at Michigan, they are perennially one of the most talented teams in college football. So you have to understand that, like, it is also the players, but he has been shutting down the Shanahan tree. So maybe, I mean, defense has always been important. Like we saw, the Patriots were in every game this season, despite the fact that their offense was actively hurting them, because they had a strong defense. So I'll just say that defense is still important. Having a guy like Jerod Mayo who knows how to get the most, that does matter. But I also, obviously having a competent offense, especially a high-powered offense that can consistently put up points, is always going to be important in the league.
And not having turnover with, the quarterback, which is the most important position on the field. So.
Ooh, thank you. Great transition. Okay, so
let's do it.
Jerod Mayo was also asked about Mac Jones. Now, it was really a conversation about leaders, where he was asked, who are the leaders on your team, the best leaders right now? Defense, he mentioned Dietrich Wise. He mentioned Jawan Bentley. Offense, he mentioned David Andrews. And free agent Hunter Henry, which I guess is kind of interesting. I don't think anybody really expects Hunter to go anywhere else. It's just like, make sure it's like a $12 million for 2 years kind of deal, where he's not taking up $10 million on your cap or anything like that. But then after those comments, he also said he doesn't know what Matt Slater is going to do. But he was asked about Mac Jones and whether or not he struggled as a leader last season. And he said Mac obviously has talent. The confidence of a player is very fragile, and confidence goes a long way. Obviously, we saw constantly Mac's confidence was shot towards not even just the end of his playing time last season, but really once that Cowboys game, that was when you started seeing him start to unravel, kind of bounce back against the Bills, had a respectable performance. But even then, he had like a 2.2 average time to throw, where, it clearly was them trying to kind of coddle him a bit. I'm curious, with Zach Robinson being the guy who can revitalize quarterbacks, like Baker Mayfield's time with LA was brief, but he played some of his best football in a long time. So I am curious, is there a world where you could see, or would advocate for the Patriots sticking with Mac and seeing what a guy like Zach Robinson can do when he has better tutelage and a better supporting cast, basically putting us back on the trajectory we were last offseason, where people were still like, all right, Mac's not, probably never going to be an all-pro, but he's still a talented enough player. And Mayo said that himself. He's like, these aren't high school kids. Like, you're in the NFL. You have talent. It's really kind of about the structure around you. So would you be down for them trying to get the best out of Mac again, maybe out of Zappy as well? Or is it still, you have a top 3 pick? Hopefully you never have a top 3 pick again. Right. Pull the trigger on one of these dynamic young quarterbacks.
It was quite the shot at Wiggy there, saying, we're not taking kids from Brockton High. Former head coach at Brockton High, Jermaine Wiggins. But no, again, another example of Mayo just being awesome. And not that Belichick didn't, give Wiggy a jab or two about being a high school head coach. But
everybody loves to make fun of Wiggy's head coaching career.
Exactly. But so, back to Mac. Very, very pointed comments about Mac Jones today from Jerod Mayo, which I found surprising. Talking about the leadership, he basically was like, yeah, we have leaders on defense, and he basically kind of, paused-ish and was like, and the quarterback needs to be a leader too, so we'll see, because David Andrews and Hunter Henry are leaders, and then when things go bad, people start to change. And I was like, he's talking about Mac. He's saying Mac was not a and
also,
started changing.
Maybe Zappy, like, is he saying like, oh,
yeah, right,
who it's going to be? Mm-hmm.
Right. He could be talking quarterback. And so that, again, I wonder what future Mac has here, especially after comments like that. And and could Mayo give him another chance? Absolutely. I mean, Mac was at his press conference and, showed up in workout clothes, and it was kind of, made a thing yesterday because Greg Bedard reported that people thought it was phony of him to show up in workout clothes because he doesn't have workout clothes there. But I know, like, Mac lives in the area and he still works out there, so maybe he just changed at home, like all this stuff that goes on. It's like, it's kind of bizarre, but there is definitely a line in the sand on even inside that building of who I guess likes and wants Mac Jones and who doesn't. And so you wonder where it's going to go with that, especially given Mayo's comments today. But as far as, being revitalized by Zach Robinson, I don't necessarily hate the idea. I even mentioned when McDaniels' name was thrown in the ring here that he could do the same for Mac because, and, sort of get him back on track like he was his rookie year. Now, is that option A for me? No, because I think you sit at number 3 and, you look at the quarterbacks who were in the postseason just this past weekend. I think what was it, 8 teams? I think 7 out of 8 quarterbacks were first-round picks. The only one was Brock Purdy, who wasn't. And so it's the premier position. You need top talent. You have the number 3 pick. Now, you could say that you're getting the 3rd best quarterback if it's Jaden Daniels in the class, and you could get the number 1 wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr. And so you got to look at these things. And Mayo made the comment today, which I don't know if we're getting to that here, but we probably, I'll throw it out there anyway, just about, taking the best available player at the top. And so I go back and forth. I do, but ultimately I think the right decision would be to go with a quarterback here, because this is the time to really reset it. Could Mac be fine? Yeah, he could. But if you can get a Jaden Daniels in here, or even a Drake May, like, the ceiling's just higher. You reset the rookie clock and go from there. So that should be the direction they go in, and maybe see what you can get for Mac in a trade or something. But if there's going to be someone who can do it, maybe it's Zach Robinson, because he is, like you said, he was running that QB school out in LA, and obviously revitalized some careers there. So, but I would go with the rookie.
And then it's not just Zach Robinson, too, on the market in terms of really coveted quarterbacks. Coach, you also have Dan Pitcher for the Bengals, who's mentored Joe Burrow his entire career. They love him down there. I think the only real competition they have is like the Raiders and the Saints, if the Patriots were to be interested in Pitcher. So another guy where there's options where if you do – and now we'll kind of get into Mayo's comment, where he was asked about the comment he made to C. Burton, where he said, we're going to get a good player at like a really important position or something like that. And he kind of reiterated, we're going to take the best available player for the biggest need on the team. And he cited that can be quarterback, it could be wide receiver, and it could be offensive line. Which was, again, refreshingly honest. That he's like, It's also kind of funny he didn't mention tight end because they don't have a single one under contract.
Yeah.
Which also kind of makes me think they're like, we might run it back, maybe add some people. But here's the interesting part. When he said that, and this is a pretty fair point to bring up, that need may not be the same as it is right now, because there still has to be free agency. We're going to get into that as well later, but, maybe they sign a couple good tackles, re-sign Mike and Wendy and Trent Brown, what have you. They bring in a big-name wide receiver who's not just a big name, but somebody they could look at and be like, all right, we're going to build around you. But then they could also, for all we know, they sign Kirk Cousins, and then quarterback is no longer the biggest need. And then you say, all right, I'm going to get a player who can walk onto an NFL field and immediately be a top 5, top 10 player at their position. So I am kind of curious what your thoughts are there, because – if you do have confidence that somebody could make Mac better, or you just get somebody else in the building as a quarterback who you do think can carry the team, is it more tempting to go for, like I said, a guy like a Joe Alt or a Marvin Harrison Jr., where legitimately they're generational prospects, where they immediately come onto the field and are one of the best players at their position?
Sounds like you're back on the Mac train, Taylor. Sounds like we got you back on the Mac train.
No, I'm trying to.
That's what you just.
I'm just being an open-minded host. As my own analyst, like no offense to Mac, but like I'm just done. I wish him the best. I want them to move on, bring in a veteran backup like a Jacoby Brissett, and get a young quarterback, because I'm with you where you have a top 3 pick. It's too high of an asset for you to pass on somebody like a Drake May or a Jaden Daniels, who they're going to come into the league and they will not immediately be a top 10 player. Jaden Daniels will be a top 3 scrambler for sure and runner, but they are going to need a year or 2 of probably serious work before you start talking about them in the upper echelon of quarterbacks, although they do have, I think, the talent to get there. Whereas you could get somebody who is, where it's like blue chip, no question about it, this is a great player. So I'm not back on Mac. I'm just trying to be open-minded to the fact that, they could get
maybe it happens.
Right. So what are your thoughts there, I guess?
It's a long pause because, again, I guess I've always, I've been a fan of Mac as far as like, I think that he did get the short end of the stick here. And even Mayo said it this morning, like, he made mistakes, but so did we as a coaching staff. And so, if you give Mac Jones a Marvin Harrison Jr. and or a Joe Alt to keep him upright, reset his confidence, and give him a guy, it could work, and you could play well and do whatever. But then, and it's kind of what I just said to the previous comment, but like, okay, they're not going to pick up his 5th-year option. I don't see why they would do that. And so then you go into his 4th year and say he plays well, then you got to pay him, or he doesn't play well, and it's like, well, why the F didn't we take Jaden Daniels? Because now he's with the Raiders, and he just rushed for 1,000 yards, and we have egg on our face. Yeah. So, like, it's tough to Again, that's why. And Phil Perry said it the other day, and he for some reason got some flack about it on Twitter. How the NFL draft is a game of chance. Like it literally is a game of chance. You have to, because you could take Marvin Harrison and he could turn into the biggest bust on the planet, right? And so you got to take your shots. I just think ultimately with the resetting of the rookie clock, this is a rebuild. And yes, are they close on defense? Yes, they are, but they still need a lot of help on offense. And so to sit here and say, no, let's quickly rebuild it with Mac, I just don't see that should be the long-term plan here. You have Jerod Mayo, who's only 37. You're not going to try and flip this into a Super Bowl team next year. So why not bring in a quarterback and develop him like that? And I don't hate the idea of, a Jacoby Brissett or somebody on the market. The only other, you mentioned Kirk Cousins. I don't see them doing that, but the one I keep gravitating towards is Baker Mayfield. And I do think that Tampa Bay is either going to franchise him or re-sign him because he really gave them something this season. But if for whatever reason they let him walk, I wouldn't hate the idea of Brian Baker here, even as a guy who you sign Baker and you draft someone in the second or third round and kind of go with that route. But no, I think I'm still on best player available at the biggest need, which ultimately is quarterback right now.
I agree. Again, it's the upside. It's like you're gonna feel really silly if you commit to Mac and then you have to pay him. That's another big part of this. Is you can have a quarterback who has a higher upside on a rookie deal, or you can have Mac for 1 year on a rookie deal. Then you have to get a new contract, and then it's like I think it's just a whole mess. And
then it turns into the Daniel Jones thing in New York, where he plays well, you sign him, now you're handicapped with his salary cap hit, and you're not that good. And like the Giants are probably still looking for a quarterback right now. So as much as I think Mac, it wasn't all his fault, I'm not a fan of running it back with him.
Agreed. All right, we can move on from that. I'm sure everyone's going to be very upset that we will no longer be talking about Mac Jones. So this is the big one. This was maybe the most exciting part of the entire interview, where Jerod Mayo was asked, you guys have a lot of assets in free agency. What are you going to do? He's like, we're bringing in talent 1,000%. We have a lot of cap space and cash. He said, we are going to burn some cash because Robert Kraft, I know he gets a lot of flack and people like to act like he's cheap. I don't know how much evidence there is to support that Kraft is cheap. I think there's plenty of evidence to support that Bill just doesn't like paying certain players or, what have you, paying certain positions. But we saw literally just in 2021, they spent a ton of money. And with Kraft being full on board that like we need to get this team back on track, money is clearly not going to be any object. And not only do they have the cash, they also have the cap space where it's not like they're going to have to bend over backwards to make it work and all those things. They're going to have a lot of space to work with. So I thought this would be fun. Our buddy, friend of the show, Brad Spielberger of PFF, always does an amazing job where they have this chart. We're going to pull it up right now where he has all the list of like team needs, all these things for the free agency, contract predictions, where I think last season, I'm pretty sure he batted like 80% at least. It was crazy. Almost every single deal he was spot on. So we're going to pull this up, go through the list, and then make our own little, free agency board and see who we think would be interesting for the Patriots to get because, hey, they're going to be burning cash, so let's have some fun. So you did say Kirk Cousins is off your board, yes?
Yeah, I just, 37 coming off an Achilles, he'll probably, I think Atlanta and Bill Belichick should be all over him, get him in for a year or two, win some games, break the record, what have you, but I'm more of on a longer rebuild for the Patriots, so I just don't see them shelling out for Kirk Cousins this year. It doesn't move the needle for me. It doesn't make much sense.
I agree. Kirk Cousins said, he has to see how things play out, but he wouldn't turn down the opportunity to play with the best coach of all time. So there's a little traction there. That would actually be really fun. I'd love to see him over there.
That's the one that makes the most sense. I mean, and I know we're going to keep going in a second, but Kirk with, Bijan and Drake London and Kyle Pitts, that offense would turn around really fast, and that would turn into a really, really good football team down in Atlanta.
Absolutely. All right, now this one's really interesting. Josh Allen, they have him 3 on their board. Now, the Patriots' edge situation is very weird. You have Anthony Jennings, who I think they should re-sign. I don't think he's going to crack $10 million just because he doesn't really contribute on passing downs. And even when he does, he really relies more on stunts and discipline more than actually being a good pass rusher. You got Matthew Judon, who's in the last year of his deal. And then obviously he's getting older, very valuable player, but you have to expect at some point he's going to fall off to some degree. Then you have Josh Uche, also a free agent like Anthony Jennings, but didn't have a great season last year, dealt with a foot injury, which obviously did have an impact on his ability to perform. But at the same time, with his style, because of how disciplined they are, it just felt like it was hard to really see how effective he was. He had some flashes, he likes that little hezzy bull rush, but it just wasn't the season that he had the year before where he really broke out towards the end of the year. But Josh Allen, and then also Keon White, he's kind of different from their edge rushers because usually Patriots edges just play outside. Keon White's different where he's inside and outside, had most of his success actually from the inside and kind of like a defensive end, Dietrich Wise kind of role. But Josh Allen is a legitimate difference maker. It's kind of weird because if you re-sign Jennings, then you have Judon. Like, where does he fit exactly? But what would you think about potentially bringing him in? Because if it's on a 1-year deal, maybe you see how it works, you extend him. I'm curious because it seems, and he's still young. He's only relatively young. He's going to turn 27, but consistently good player. He's ranked, let's see, he was 11th last season, 10th the season before. One of the best guys at the position. What do you think?
I mean, they're going to either have to rework Matthew Judon's contract or try and trade him out of it because that just, I mean, he's going to want more money, just like he did last year, restructure, and I don't really blame him, even though he's coming off the injury. So if they don't feel like doing that and they just want to start anew with somebody else, I like the idea of Josh Allen. I mean, like you said, he's a game changer. He's a difference maker. People always think of Josh Allen, the quarterback, but Josh Allen, the D end, might be, just as good. He's just a little bit overshadowed because of the position. And so I don't hate the idea. I think it would be a lot to add him to the room if you're going to go with, again, Judon and White and Jennings and, re-sign everybody and keep everyone apart. Like, it's kind of seems redundant and feels like I wouldn't, allot my salary cap space there. But you wonder, again, new regime, new people, like still defensive minded, Patriots head coaching staff and clearly front office. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't hate the idea. It was just, it kind of depends on Judon and what they want to do there.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And who was number 2 on this list?
So this is specifically the Patriots needs.
Oh,
okay, I
should
have clarified that. I just got so excited.
No, that's fine. No, you did. I didn't know if it was ranked that way. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, these are specifically Patriots positional needs.
Got it. Okay, so I don't hate the idea of Josh Allen, but I think it's dependent on what they do at the position right now too.
Also, what they do with edges, whether they want to continue with the philosophy that they have, or whether they maybe let somebody off the chain a little bit more, because again, so much of what they do relies on being disciplined. But with the modern age of all these scrambling quarterbacks, it can be tough. Although Josh Allen, it's kind of funny, owns Josh Allen the quarterback. Like anytime they play, he has like a new career game, which is pretty crazy.
It's hilarious.
Now this one's interesting. T. Higgins. Obviously,
it's like a slam dunk, Taylor. We talked about having just conversation on here, and not like this is the one I gave a caveat, and I had to cut you off because I gave the caveat to Josh Allen, and it depends on the position room where that goes. T. Higgins, 25, unsigned, projected for a 1-year deal, or is that just what they're saying his average annual value will be?
It's a 1-year deal, and he'd make about $22 million.
Interesting. Okay. I feel like they're probably going to franchise him, but I say that you make this happen any time of day, no matter what. You have to bring T. Higgins into that room somehow, some way.
But that's the thing, and this is something that's going to come up a few times. The only reason I hesitate is because is he going to be available? Like, I want to put him on this list. I wouldn't even think about it. But realistically, and I feel like it's going to come up with a lot of the wide receiver free agents outside of like Mike Evans, and he still could as well. I think a lot of these guys are going to get franchise tagged, and that's the issue. I don't even think they're going to hit the open market. So, I mean, I feel like T. Higgins and most of these top receivers are going to be no-brainers, but realistically, do we think he's even going to make it out of Cincinnati?
No, he's not.
No.
I don't think so. They would be silly to not keep him there. And yeah, they do. And we talked about Trey Brown, the guy who's developed that, helped develop that team out in Cincinnati. Like, talk about their receiver room with Chase and Higgins and Tyler Boyd rather. Like, they have dudes, but it's still, like they could lean on in theory Boyd and Chase without Higgins. But you also have 3 top wide receivers in your room with Joe Burrow, who is coming off an injury. Like, help him out as much as you can. They obviously have a chemistry there, so they'd be silly to not to let him go. But if they do let him go, this should be their number one signing. But realistically, you're right. I don't think he's getting out of Cincinnati.
I want to put him on this list so bad, but I can't. So we have to
just do it. Put him on. He's a free agent. Put him on.
All right. What? All right. Free agent wish list. Just wish list.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll do that. So T. Higgins. What was that contract? Let's see. That was 1 year. 21.66.
Yeah.
$66 million. All right, God, I'm typing like my dad. Okay, let's go. All right, Brian Burns, another interesting edge option, even younger than Josh Allen. Although that Carolina scheme, I believe, are just a penetrating defense where there's not a lot of like discipline, got to keep the guy contained. I feel like they just kind of let him off and he just gets to attack. So I don't know that he'd be a great scheme fit. Obviously, uber talented player, just needs to get the hell out of Carolina so he can get to a contender.
Yeah.
Who knows what that's. I think the Patriots are going to turn around pretty quickly. But are you interested, just given, again, the scheme fit and how he would be integrated? And you see the overall defensive grades. He's been pretty middle of the pack to like not great. And that's because he's a great pass rusher, not as good of a run defender.
Similar to, their thing with Judon. And obviously Judon's a much better run defender. But he can rush the passer as well. But like if they decide to do something else with Judon and maybe not re-sign Jennings, then yeah, I would give Brian Burns, a bag of money to come here and rush the passer. But I would rather keep who they have in the room currently than move off of like the Josh Allen. I would be fine with them moving off from Judon and bringing in a guy like Josh Allen, where Brian Burns, like, okay, it would be good. It would help if you end up moving on, but I still would I would rather keep the room intact how it is rather than move it around just for a guy in Brian Burns.
Agreed. Okay. Michael Pittman Jr. Now, this one's a bit more interesting because obviously doesn't have the physical upside of a lot. Like even Mike Evans, he's just not quite as explosive, but he's uber reliable. They've had so many different quarterbacks play for the Colts, especially when you talk about like the different skill set or the skill level of these quarterbacks. Had Anthony Richardson for like a minute, and then he had to go the rest of the season with Gardner Minshew, who obviously has his flashes, but those flashes are also kind of weighed down by some really tough moments. Pittman Jr. is not really an X. I think you could put them in there in certain packages. He's more of a Z. Is he someone you'd want to put on the wish list? Also, probably going to get franchise tagged. Let's say that.
Probably. I'm same boat as Higgins. Like Higgins is above him on my list. I think he's a little bit younger, and I think he's a little bit better. But I would sign Michael Pittman 100% if he's available. Again, a guy who they could probably will franchise tag or make stay there because he's their best wide receiver, and they have to keep developing Anthony Richardson next season. So why take away the best, pass catcher in your room? But if he does hit the market, then yeah, the Patriots need a wide receiver. So throw Pittman on the list 100%.
All right, Mike. Oh my gosh, that is all caps. All right.
Because we really want Michael Pittman.
So badly. All right. So there we go. 21.66. This is where Ahmed come in handy. We miss you, buddy. All right.
I think he actually, I was just looking on YouTube and he threw in a thumbnail on the thing. So Ahmed is awake, I think.
Oh, well, good morning, Ahmed. All right. Yeah. All right, Daniil Hunter. Now, I say no. He's a great pass rusher, a well-rounded player as well. But at the same time, I feel like it's a similar situation to Matthew Judon, where he's older
same guy.
Up there. Yeah. So we're just no, quick no.
Yeah, skip him.
Yeah.
Should we add Josh Allen to the list? Like, should Allen be on our list, or are we just gonna?
I think. Yeah. Why not? Yep.
We could throw him on. Yeah, throw him on.
Yep. Josh Allen. Oh, I should do positions because this could get confusing. Wide receiver. The beauty of live streams. All right, 1 year.
Better this way.
21.92 million. All right. Oh my God, I got my screens mixed up. All right. Now, Mike Evans. Mike Evans balled out yesterday.
Yep.
Obviously, he had a couple easy drops, but at the same time, he had a way more big-time catches and big moments, dominated at the end of the first half. 3 years, $23 million. Now, he has nagging soft tissue injuries and has like forever. So that is something to consider. Also, age is a consideration. But at the same time, I think one of the things you need to get in this wide receiver room is a veteran with championship experience who everybody can look up to and be like, you are the standard. So do we want to put Mike Evans on the list? Because I'm all for it, but I also understand there are legitimate concerns as well.
I think you have to put every wide receiver who's available on the list. And not everyone, but like, these top three guys, like if you land any of them, then I'm all for it. Like a guy who you mentioned reliable, a guy who he's never not had 1,000-yard season in the NFL. He's won a Super Bowl. He has playoff experience. Like, sure, soft tissue injury is obviously a problem, but he's better than anybody you have in your room right now. And he'll be better than anybody you have in your room next year. And so, yes, I would rather, Higgins is number 1, Pittman's number 2, Evans is number 3, but I put Mike Evans on the list for sure. And so now I'm looking at the way we were.
Do we want to move this around a little bit?
No. I'm just thinking more so like what Brad is kind of putting for like the projected contracts. The 1-year deal guys are definitely franchise tag guys, right?
I would think so, yeah.
Because like Evans is getting 3 years, but you would think Higgins would get a 5-year deal on the market, but I think he's projecting them to be franchise tags. So that
I think it's also
kind of
workshopping because he dealt with injuries too. Yeah. He was kind of like he missed some games, so I think that's also in consideration. But with Michael Pittman, I think the assumption is that they're probably going to get tagged. Yeah. I think that's a tag.
It's
number.
the same number. It's the tag number.
Yeah.
Okay. But so add Evans all day.
Yep, he's there. Tyron Smith, is he even going to make it out of Dallas? He's an old head, but he's still a beast, though.
I know.
And Trent Brown's also an old head, so it's like, do you want a guy with, again, playoff experience, highly respected, and also is probably going to play for you at a high level? Also a guy who dealt with injuries, but again, so has Trent Brown. So I feel like when it comes to how you're going to restock at left tackle, the options are really like Tyron Smith, Trent Brown, and Jonah Williams. Jonah Williams was a right tackle last season. So do we want to put Tyron Smith on there, or are we saying, we might be able to do better?
I wish somebody asked Mayo about Trent Brown this morning on the Greg Hill show. That would have been a good question.
Yeah, that would have been a good. I just want to know how they feel about him inside the locker room. Because we've had Sophie, and she mentioned that a lot of things haven't really gone his way, and they kind of mess with his head and things like that.
Right.
But then there's also the side of there have also been reports that people in the locker room weren't happy with his effort. So it's like, if they play well, if he plays well, no one's going to care. Like at the end of the day, if you play well, people are going to forget a lot of things. But how far gone is that situation?
Yeah, and that being said, for the same amount of money, I'd probably take Tyron Smith, to be honest. New blood, not dealing with the potential headache that Trent can bring. And again, it's all reported and rumored, so I don't know exactly what's going on there. But if you can get Tyron Smith in here for again a 1-year deal, $10 million, like yes, 100%, because it helps. You're not tying yourself to a almost 34-year-old tackle. You bring him in for a year. You shore up the O-line, and then, next year you draft, or, you draft this year and you develop. And I think that would be a solid left tackle to help out a rookie for their first season.
Yep. Agreed. All right. And I feel like as this goes, he's probably going to keep getting bumped down the list just in terms of priority and all those things. But I mean, look at those grades. That's crazy. I mean, obviously 2022 wasn't very good. I think he battled injuries even more then. Yeah. Marquise Brown. How do you feel about him? Honestly, I am not interested.
Not huge on him. I think No, I think he's dealt with injury. I'm pass on him. I want like one of these big name receivers, and if not, I'd rather draft one. So
Bryce Huff.
You've been talking about Bryce Huff for months.
Yes. Like ever since Josh Uche's play started to decline, I was like, but Bryce Huff's been killing it. He did well against the Pats. I really like him as an option to replace Uche. Now, he's a situational guy. But at the same time, so is Uche. Like I think Uche had more flashes against the run than he has in years past. But at the same time, he also would just completely go inside, and there was nobody coming over the top and giving up big runs. So personally, I would like to see Bryce Huff instead. But they've also developed Uche. I think Uche clearly has a relationship with Jerod Mayo, and I think that they do like him in the building. And in terms of a locker room presence, he seems fantastic. It's really just like, all right.
And he was there. I mean, he was at Mayo's press conference. Like that tells you something too.
Yeah, but how do you feel? I want to put Bryce Huff on here. I'd probably put him over Josh Allen, to be honest with you.
What?
Especially with the value. With the value? Yeah. Age value?
Yeah, so
and
if we're doing this
Josh Allen
order,
probably isn't playing every down. That's the
I think
thing.
we
Unless
should
they move
also
on from Judon.
I think we should also bump Josh Allen under Michael Pittman, if we're being honest.
Okay, that's fair.
So let's go Higgins, Huff, Pittman, Allen.
I like that. Oh, what the heck? All right.
Yeah, there we
go. Bryce Huff.
Because Huff, you're right. You're not shelling out all that money for Josh Allen here. You have Huff for this 3-year deal, which
And in terms of situational pass rushers, you don't get a lot better than Bryce Huff. And also, his grades are pretty good. He doesn't play against the run a lot, but he clearly isn't doing all that bad. I need to watch more. Most of the tape that I've seen from him, to be totally honest, is him rushing the passer. But He's very, very good at it. I would love to see him on the team. I think that gives your pass rush a huge amount of juice, which would be very valuable because you don't know what's going to happen with Keon White. Again, I think he may be better as an interior rusher, and then you're kind of left with Matt Judon sometimes, and then it's pretty shallow there. So Bryce Huff, we got Trent Brown, 2 years. It's so cheap.
Do we put him on the list? I think we got to put him on the list.
Under Tyron Smith.
Yeah.
Just because of the off-field stuff.
You need to screen grab this and put it on Twitter after and watch the world burn. Okay.
You do it. You're more used to that than I am, Mr. SpongeBob meme.
That's fair.
All right, yeah, but I think we already talked about Trent Brown. Obviously, still an outstanding player when he's healthy, but there's the injury to consider. Although he did play all of 2022, he lost like 10 pounds when he had the flu and still managed to play. Right. He showed even last season that he played through a concussion, which is not advisable. I do not think that's okay, but he did it. Yeah, you can call him a lazy bum if you want, but still, when it comes to like at times looking for the team over himself, I think he's shown that he will do it. It's inconsistent, I will say that. And again, if there are people inside the locker room saying that they had an issue with his effort, that is what it is. Whether or not he thinks it's fair or not, how he was treated, that's the case. But I think you have to at least have him as a consideration. Again, because it's 2 years, less than $8 million a year for a very good left tackle. You just don't get those, especially for a guy who's well-rounded and can dominate in the run game.
Yep. Calvin Ridley.
I think so he's not a franchise tag projection. I honestly,
it's a lot of money.
I don't know. It is a lot, especially he's 29 years old. He has a drop problem, and I know you could say like drops aren't that important, but like drops in big moments are. It's kind of like that Tyreek Hill thing where you can produce a lot, and drops don't matter if you're a good player, but if you're dropping plays like touchdowns and things like that, that are literally game-changing plays, I don't know. I personally am not that interested in Calvin Ridley, to be honest. Very talented. I'm not going to act like he's not, but stay with Trevor Lawrence, continue to develop. I'm not that.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm with you. So let's move on and let's grab Big Mike Onwenu right there and put him right under.
Where are we putting him? We already know
right under T. Higgins.
Under T. Higgins? All right. Yep. What do you think? Totally fair. I would only. I think I'd put him over T. Higgins, to be totally honest with you, especially because of what he already gives you in the locker room.
Yeah, you're right. He should be. He should be. He should be top priority this offseason. He really should be.
I'm just gonna call him an O-line because so again, there is already precedent for the kind of contract they could give him where Elton Jenkins for the Packers, I should put average, shouldn't I? Yeah, I'll do that for the other ones. But Elton Jenkins, his contract is structured where if he is, if he plays offensive tackle, he gets paid like an offensive tackle. Mm-hmm. If he plays guard, he gets paid like a guard. And obviously there's like all pro incentives and things like that. I think that's what you want for Big Mike because frankly, I think he is best suited as a guard still. Can he play tackle? Yes, but I would love to see them maybe either sign a couple tackles outside of Onwenu or draft one, sign one, and let him play his best position. I also know that there's been some talk about him not fitting if it's like a McVay scheme. But one thing about McVay's scheme is he's been flexible. They run a lot of duo, which is what the Patriots ran almost exclusively. And I think outside zone, I don't think he's great because you don't want him trying to like get across the face of people very often. But I think if you talk about mid zone where you're really trying to hit inside, which is really what the Patriots run, I think that could still work. So I don't really think that he's as scheme restricted as some people do think. Also, like you'd have to completely outside of Cole Strange, who's hurt, you'd have to pretty significantly overhaul your personnel and just kind of start from scratch with people that haven't been in the building, which I don't know that I'm a huge fan of, especially because Mike Onwenu has been so influential and has emerged as a leader this season. Is so homegrown talent. I think it sets a good example that, yes, this regime will pay people who bust their butts and really play hard for us. But
Bingo.
What do you think?
I echo everything you just said about Big Mike. I think it's the Jeremy Fowler report last week that said that the Patriots know he's as good as gone. Like that, that irked me. Like again, homegrown,
especially because Sophie Weller said the opposite, while asking him directly, which is kind of weird.
And so you wonder what side. Obviously, that's probably coming from the team side from Fowler, but like bring him back. He's worth it. Like people say the versatility. Not that it's a negative, but almost like you don't have a place for him. But it's like no, like you pay him at. Again, that's the thing I wonder is where, is the same thing going to happen where you say you're going to play me a guard, then you play me a tackle, so you pay me as a guard, and then I have to move, and the whole thing where the Elton Jenkins thing is perfect. Like, And now, granted, everyone will be like, no, I play tackle. You pay me like a tackle. But I still think that's worth it. Like, then you just have, like, someone who you can put everywhere, and then you work with it. So, long story short, on when it was number one on my list, he should be their top priority this offseason.
I agree. Oh, looks like, all right, we may have to cut this we'll try to get to 30 before my battery dies. Okay. All right. So Chase Young.
Yeah, we'll do out a top 10 here. We'll put out a top 10 and then we'll bounce. All right.
Perfect. So Chase Young, he's interesting because he's more defensive. And this is also kind of the case for Bryce Huff, to be fair. They're more defensive end than outside linebacker, which is what the Patriots usually like. They're obviously, scheme versatile, but you very rarely see them line up like true defensive ends outside. But he's young. He's talented. He's doing well. He's been playing pretty well this entire season. Obviously, the injuries are a concern. But
yeah, I didn't notice him that. I didn't really notice him that much in the game the other day. Like, he didn't make that.
I thought I saw him flash a few times, but definitely not. It wasn't a game changer.
Yeah, and that could just be not really a scheme thing, but playing second to it's tough with Nick Bosa and what have you. But
and the Pats also reportedly had interest at the trade deadline. We also should note that. So it's not like they wouldn't even consider it. There's some level of interest in him. Would you put him on the list though for the top 10?
Yeah, you put him on the list again because it makes sense, right? I mean, you see, we're talking here with the whole Judon situation with his contract. You bring in a young guy, you're trying to rebuild, you sign him to a longer deal. I think I'm looking at. I want to put him on the list. I'm trying to think of where I want to put him on the list, and
I'm thinking like between Tyron and Trent.
Yeah,
because it's only a year. He's 25 years old.
Yeah, I say go after Tyron Smith because as much as I want Chase Young and I think he's a better, obviously better player and younger than Tyron Smith, having a left tackle next season is a lot more important than having Chase Young.
Yep, agreed. All right, and that's also assuming that he would probably replace Josh Uche.
Yeah,
and be more of a situational guy. Jonathan Grenard. Now he's interesting because he's a young guy who didn't get a lot of attention because the Texans weren't playing well, but he's been very good for them. Another guy who's young, obviously would fit because he comes from the Nick Caserio system. What do you think about him? Would you want to maybe round out the list with him?
Who's after Clowney? I want to see what we have.
Clowney, we've got Zadarius Smith, Mekhi Becton, Uche.
Ooh.
And then let's just get to the top 50. Then Leonard Floyd and I want Jonah Williams.
All right, we're going to put Jonah Williams is going to be our last guy. And I think
okay. All right. I would put him
I was going to say I think even though he played right tackle this year, I still put him over a guy like Tyron Smith. And should we put him at 5 under Michael Pittman?
I'm thinking so, yeah. Yeah, I think so. Because I also know he's very respected and played really hard for the Bengals.
Yeah.
I think he's a guy that they would want back. Clearly, with that contract, I think he earned himself a decent amount of money. So,
yeah,
I think that'd be pretty good. All right. So, would we maybe want to move somebody? Would we want to put Grenard in for somebody else who's already on the list before we close it?
I'm just trying to look at.
I might bump Chase Young, to be totally honest with you.
You'd rather Grenard?
Maybe, yeah. Because we know he's a scheme fit. He's young, up and comer. That's not the $15 million. That's not terrible money. And he's a guy that could play every down for you, where if he develops well, he could be your Matt Judon replacement. That's just my take, though.
Yeah, I look at Chase Young, and again, maybe I'm putting too much value in the fact that he was the number 2 overall pick and that he has such a high upside. Versus Grenard's, again, the scheme fit, and he obviously played well. I like Chase Young being younger, though, too, and a guy who, you could build your core around potentially. Oh, man. You make the decision. This one's on you.
I'm bumping Chase Young.
All right, sounds good. There's our top 10.
Grenard. 3 years. 15.75 million. All right, there it is. And once again, this is based on our buddy Brad Spielberger, one of the best and brightest at PFF, his list with the top 50 players at positions of need for the Patriots. So Kyle Duggar, I'm not even sure how – obviously was not on the list. It's because, they don't really need a safety badly.
Yeah, right.
Obviously, I think they could use a post safety, and if Duggar leaves, things could change.
Yep.
But, they could re-sign Jalen Mills. They've still got Marte Mapu. They could live without Kyle Duggar, who also I know Brad projects will be someone who gets the franchise tag, which would make a lot of sense because he had kind of a down year. See if you want to pay him. He's also on the older side. Maybe let him test the market, see what happens there. But this is our list. Learn it, love it, ingest it.
And we'll tweet it out. I'll tweet it out. So
there we go. All right, perfect.
Well, you can check it out there too.
We're about to close out before my battery dies. But Mike, let the people know what you got coming down the pipeline.
All right. Lot of Mayo Patriots coaching staff reactions and reporting over at WEEI.com. We'll have all you covered over on the Six Rings pod too. So make sure you rate, review, subscribe to that. You can hear Taylor on there. We'll have him on a bunch of this offseason as well. So we're going to do a lot of collaborating here as we figure out what's going on with this 2024 Patriots team. So anything and all things Patriots, you can follow along on Twitter at Mike Kadlick. And we'll go from there. So thanks for having me, Taylor. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on, brother. You're going to be the first, or not the first of many, but the many of many.
Yes.
Thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate you. I'll also be back later today to have Brett Coleman on to discuss the Patriots coaching search, GM search, as well as potential of Bill Belichick going to the Falcons. Tune in for that at 5 o'clock Eastern time. But for now, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other.